So as we start this bird flap animation, very important question to ask is why would we even do it in the first place? Couple reasons for that. First of all, it's just cool. Seems like a lot of animators like to do a bird flap. And I don't know if there is a complete explanation for it. It's just cool. Second reason is that it very, very clearly demonstrates the principle of overlap, which is also called follow-through or successive breaking of joints. And that principle of overlap in animation is really, really important. You see it everywhere. You see it from clapping hands to cloth to a person lifting weights or even getting up from a chair. You just see it absolutely everywhere in animation. So it's a really important principle to get a handle on, and the wing bird flying is a really good way to do that. And then finally, because the bird is not on the ground and doesn't have ground animation like a squirrel hopping along with its tail following through, it just takes out one of the elements of having to animate it. So at Animation Mentor, they give you this character, Taylor, and he's like that. It's a really, really good exercise. I'm just taking away the aspect of having to worry about animation hopping up and down on the ground, which is a whole nother level all its own. Now we're starting in Illustrator for just a second. You can see how I set these things up in my character animation or character rigging video. Just a couple things that I want to point out, that each piece of the bird is its own layer, and that my overall frame is bigger than 1080 1920 by 1080 pixels. It's just bigger than that. That's because if I ever want to zoom in, I like to have things bigger than the 1920 by 1080p or whatever size I happen to be using. So bringing that into After Effects, you can also see my tips for this on the character rigging video, but just really quickly importing. There it is. Composition in this case, and each layer being the layer size. And if we open that up, we get exactly what we made in Illustrator. Layer 2 I don't need, it's just black. And then just going through each piece, we want to make sure that we've got each piece with its correct anchor point. Basically, it's going to rotate wherever that point is. So the letter Y, or this little button up here, just drag it to where it would be. Quite simple. Doesn't have to be exact, you can actually change it later with no problems. Same thing. Done. And then you also have to deal with dependencies. So the left and right wings are going to be connected to the body. The middle wing will be connected to the root, and the tip, of course, to the middle ring. So quite a simple model. That's it, and we're set up and ready to animate. We start with animating the root, and everything moves with it, which is good. This is where I go into the graph editor. I've got 700 frames of animation. It's probably more than I'll ever need, but I've got it there. Graph editor, this button here, or Shift F3. It's where I do most of my animation work. I'm going to split up, separate the X and the Y axes. Really important reason for doing that. It's so I can control how fast and slow things happen. So we just set a keyframe. Let's say that that's its highest point, which maybe a little bit higher. Set a keyframe. I'll usually time this out, or try to figure out how long it takes for that bird to go up and down. Now it's going to go down slowly, And let's just say 20 frames for now. I'm running at 30 frames a second in this particular case. It's going to go down slow and then come back up faster. So let's say it takes 20 to go down and 10 to go back up. That's just based on observation as well as on logic. As a bird flaps its wings down, it pushes the body upward, and that's going to be the faster one. And then it's just going to kind of float its way back down. So there's my 3 keyframes. Down and back up. Take those keyframes and put handles on them. And that gives it a little bit of ease in and ease out, so it's not just so down slow, back up. And that feels about right for timing right now. But I may adjust later because I see that I'm only running half time anyway. It's not grabbing it fast enough. So just with that, we take that and the rest is the same. It's a cycle. It's not going to change. We could cycle it through. That's one option in After Effects and probably any other animation program. But I'm going to just copy and paste for my purposes right now. So if that took 20 frames, then we give ourselves another 20. And I would say the amount of time it takes to get down and back up is about right, but this is a great time to check that. So we take that and render it out. Don't have to render out all 700 frames, probably never use that many anyway. Okay, ScreenFlick doesn't like me looking at the desktop. I don't know why. I'm going to just get it from here. Here's the render I just made. That's actually a bit fast. I think that's not the speed that I really want. So returning to After Effects. Very easy to do. Just take and highlight all those. Get the handle around it and extend out. Let's see. It's closer. I also think that it could go a little bit higher. So let's get those high points and drag them right down. I spent a lot of time on this root because everything else in our animation is built on that root. So if you don't get the root right, the rest of the animation isn't going to work either. Gonna go with that timing for now. No, I'm not. I don't like it. Yeah, it's more like a natural kind of breathing feel, which is what I want. So, and we can see just looking at this closely, steep curves are fast changes and longer curves are longer changes. So that's what's happening. The other thing to notice too, for After Effects, higher X is down and lower X is up. That's because this point up here is 0, 0, and then it goes down as it's counting upward. So that can be confusing for a while till you start getting used to that. Now, based on that, we're going to go ahead and take just some of the wings and see that it appears that that wing is actually pushing that action. So I like to see my Y graph in place And the point is that as the bird starts going up, the wing actually pushed it up. So understanding that relationship between the wing and the bird is really important. So if we go there and say maybe 2 frames before it started going up, the wing started pushing. This is all rotation here. So the wing had been up like that. Starts pushing it down to the next point, which I'm also going to say is 2 frames before. That gives us the effect that the wing started pushing before the bird started moving, because the wing had to push it. Now I'm leaving all this area empty here. In a cycle, I can do that really easily because I can just cut into the animation a little bit later. Or if we want, we could fill in all that with animation. But right now, I'm just not going to worry about it. It'd be kind of like a pickup note in music if I did. There's always one piece that's going to be off, that's going to have to start the animation. It's not going to have its full cycle in there when we're doing overlap. So those are the 2 frames that I need. We're going to go ahead and take them and give them handles. And then every time before, 2 frames before the bird starts going up, copy paste, the wing pushed it. So 2 frames before, the wing pushed it, and all the way down the line. We've got as many as we need. And that should certainly be enough for now. So we just play that through, just make sure everything's working like we want. There's a definite relationship between that wing and the body that it's pushing. Now this is where we start getting that overlap, where this part of the wing leads this part of the wing, which leads this part of the wing. Actually quite simple to do. One of the ways at least you can do it is to just take all those animations, all those rotations, copy them, go up to the next place, to the next joint, move over a certain number of frames. In this case, I'm going to move over 1, 2, 3, 4 frames and paste exactly that. Now what starts happening is as the first section, I'll unclick that, finishes its downward turn, the next section finishes its downward turn. And as the first section finishes its upward turn and starts going back down, the next section is still finishing its upward turn. And that's overlap. And it's just 4 frames behind the first one. So again, just take and render that out really quick just to see what it looks like. Just slightly behind it. Gives it a nice fluid feel. Same thing. Take that middle section and copy it. Go back to where it started. Advance, in this case, 4 frames. Which is just a number I'm picking from what I've discovered before. It could be 2, it could be 5. Again, on the tip part, paste it. And again, we get that overlap. So now as the first section's finishing up, it's down. The next section needs to finish up, it's down. And then the third section needs to finish up, it's down. Now you see it, it's just ever so slight, but it is there. We get like an S shape, where we've got things going 3 different directions. This one going that, this one going that, and then this one going similar to the first one, but it's finishing its turn while this one is making its next turn. It's really important that we get that shape. And if you're looking at your overlap and it doesn't have this shape at any point or very close to it, you probably don't have as quite a fluid overlap as the one that you're looking for. Now, I'm going to guess that this is pretty good. It's going to look pretty good once I filled it out with the drawing of an actual bird. Or even this isn't too bad. It's a little bit on the floppy side. And there are some things that we could do about that, but it's not bad. It's got a nice feel to it. Now, of course, we have to deal with the wings on the other side. The thing about being an artist on the computer is you have to think both like a computer and like an artist at the same time. So in reality, of course, both wings would be flapping at the same time. And if we really needed to, we might say, hey, listen, let's do them both at the same time. Or having an overall understanding of what's happening so that you can do them separately as I'm doing. Lots of different ways you can do any animation. Somebody recently just said there's many workflows as there are animators, and I think that's probably true. It's just the way that I do it. Now, interestingly enough, of course, many of you can predict if I just take that and copy it, it's going to be that, which would be a very, very confused bird that would probably neither go up nor down, just kind of twirl around in the sky, I suppose. So obviously we can't do that. So what we have to do in this case is it just happens to be the exact opposite. So hold down Command or Control. If you do Windows, and bam, there it is. Just the exact opposite. Of course, we could go through and line them up as I did the original wing on the right, but this is faster, and since I understand what's happening, it's the way that I'm going to do it. So you can take those, offset in my case by 4 frames. Rotation, copy those, and offset by 4 frames. And that's it. We've got a flying bird. Quite an easy animation in many respects. Made that in about 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. Of course, I have some experience. It might take a little longer the first time, but the concept is quite simple. From there, we can take it and we can play with it and try some things out. One of the things we can try, I'm just going to hide this half of the body for the moment. One of the things we can try is taking that offset. I had offset it by 4 frames and saying, well, what would happen if we went, 8 frames? We take all these frames, and right now they're 4 frames apart, so 1, 2, 3, 4. That's option arrow. And 1, 2, 3, 4. What happens if we offset them by 8 frames, not 4 frames? And there are certain levels of floppiness versus firmness. There are certain levels of it stops even making sense. This is right at that edge of almost not even making sense anymore, but it's certainly quite floppy. And bird wings probably not going to look like that. However, if you wanted a comedic effect, you could do that. So that's a simple little thing just by offsetting a different number of frames. And it's a lot of fun to play with this and try it out. So another thing we can play with is the amount of rotation. Let's say we want this wingtip to actually raise more at its height. So we take those points where it's at its height and we say, let's just take all those and drag them. And make it go higher. What would that do? Or, at its lowest, we want it to curl under a little bit more. So we just take those low points and we say, okay, let's take those and drag them down and see what happens. This, in addition to how late it falls, also adds to the floppiness. I once did a walk with toes and they were just floppy, floppy, floppy toes. So we had to kind of go back and say, what's causing that? This is absolutely one of the reasons. How high does it lift or how low does it go will bring the floppy aspect to it. Another thing we could do is actually change what the wings look like in our original design. As I warned in the first video, in the character rigging video, you have to be really, really careful with changing the way things look. Let's say, for instance, we wanted the wings to look a little bit more like actual wings, not just like these computer-generated kinds of looks. So, and the only problem with doing that, as I've warned, is that you get things that are a little bit off, and it's not even that hard to fix necessarily, depending on the complexity of the model. But if you wanted to do something like this, for instance, and go back and change the original Illustrator file and say, you know what, let's make it look like this, you can do that. So on and so forth. And back to the original Illustrator file. You could also take this bird and you could take it and render it out in 3D. So for instance, sort of 3D. After Effects 3D is not real 3D, it just kind of looks like it. But 1920 by 1080 and bird 3D. Now the advantage of doing this, of course, is you get a little bit of perspective. So take that bird, just drag it in, decrease the size, and put it as a 3D layer, which of course gives you the options to rotate in X, Y, and Z. And we could actually take and rotate and make this bird as though it's flying at an angle. Which if you wanted to draw around it, you could do that. Just makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Not real 3D, it doesn't actually have the depth of the wings that would be there or the depth of the body that would be there. So you have to extrapolate a little bit to get the drawings you want, but it's not bad to look at even like that. So it's another possibility. And then the other possibility based on that idea is to actually render this out as a PNG sequence, and I'm not going to teach this right now. But to render it out and then go ahead and draw on top of it. And that's exactly what I did with my Pelican flight. I used a program, ArtRage, which is a pretty decent painting program, and just went frame by frame and drew those wings as they would appear. Now this is time consuming, but it's not that bad. Like my bird flap is running, you know, my cycle is running about 30 frames or so. A little bit closer to 50. So you have to draw like 40 frames, depending on how fast your bird flaps. Takes some time, but it's not that bad, and it's definitely worth the results once you get a rendered bird the way you wanted to draw it. So there are a lot of options to take this simple basic bird, as cool as he is on his own, and do some alternative additions to it. So that's it. As always, I will share the files and you can use the files for your own sake. I'll share the file that has just the non-moving bird as well as the bird that I already pre-animated. So you'll have that. You'll have my notes. Go ahead and take them. Please do leave comments. I've got my next 6 videos or so lined up that I think that would be useful to people. But if there are other videos that people would like to see that I could help with, I would love to see some of those comments as well. So thank you very much. Remember to subscribe, and we'll see you later.